You're listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we're featuring the session Supporting Young Readers During Tough Times that was presented at Children's Institute 2024 in New Orleans.
Okay, welcome to Supporting Children or Readers During Tough Times. The intro to this, I'll just read this out loud real quick. It's, adults don't always have the answers. And just like adults, kids have the urge and want to seek out answers to difficult questions and situations. In this section, we will discuss how bookstores can display, discuss, and create an environment for young readers where they feel empowered to ask about and find the answers to their tough questions and difficult events happening in the world. So we are basically riding on the coattails of Renee's wonderful keynote this morning, but we are applying it amongst ourselves and how this is actually boots on the ground for us. So, to introduce myself and our panel, my name is Heather Albinson, she, her. I am the events lead at Rumpus Books, Minneapolis. And with me are...
So I'm Danielle Pernell, she, her. I am at King's Books in Tacoma, Washington.
And I am Lorie Barber, also she, her, and I am with Anderson's Bookshop in Naperville, Illinois.
And since it does kind of apply to our panel, I want to ask both of you and do a little show of hands in here. My store is entirely children's, but that's not the same for all of yours. Can you say a little something about your stores?
Yeah, so we are a general bookstore, but we have a pretty massive kids selection. Almost the entire right side of the store is all kids and teens and like children's graphic novels. So even though we're general, we have a very strong children's focus.
And how big is your staff? I forgot to ask that.
Ooh, it's again, big store. Only 4 of us though. The struggle's real.
Amazing. Yeah, we're a store of 9. And Lorie?
Oh boy, so we are a general bookstore, but literally the right side of the bookstore is all kids. I'm the education director, and we are very, very fortunate to have 2 shops, one in Downers Grove, one in Naperville, and a staff overall of about 30 to 40, depending.
So just to take a show of hands, because
So
this does somewhat relate to our topic because of how we can support each other, because some of us are in an ecosystem of children's book selling, and some of you are the only person in your store, and some of you are the only children's person in your store. So by show of hands, who here is from a general bookstore?
Oh,
that's most of you. Who here is from a solely children's store? Hi, guys. Who here is a secret third thing? Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, Jen, okay. So this is definitely a part of this discussion, and we'll get into that in a little bit. A little view into our agenda, but this is more of a conversation. So this is a loose framework for us. Our slides are very bare minimum because it's more about what we have to say together in here. So, again, Renee teed us up really, really well, but we assume you are all here because you care, and that sounds cheesy, but you know how much you care about this. We know how much we deeply care about children's book selling. And I'm going to read this quote quick out loud because this is really the crux of a lot of what we do, of the invisible labor that we do in our field. So this is from Adrienne Rich. It says, whatever is unnamed, undepicted in images, whatever is omitted from biography, censored in collections of letters, whatever is misnamed as something else, made difficult to come by, whatever is buried in the memory by the collapse of meaning under an inadequate or lying language, this will become not merely unspoken, but unspeakable. So if you don't know if you don't see yourself represented in what's happening, if you don't see anything about your situation, is it even real? We all know this in children's book selling, that things are getting better for representation out there, but it's up to us to be able to put those books into children's hands. So as we move forward, put your critical thinking hats on. Some of this is going to feel like old hat to some of you, and that's great because that means you're working hard on these things in your store, and some of this is going to feel like new thoughts. So be open, whether you have been in this career for 30 years or just a few months. Put your hats on as we're talking about this and can think about how you're already applying some of these things in your space, and what else could you maybe do? So I'll start turning to you two. So in this supporting young readers through tough times, we identified tough times as, concentric circles. You have global tough times. to talk about hard things, local, interpersonal, and internal times. So, for you both, I think I'll just start with this. How do you, within your stores, not only to your, the community that comes in, but amongst your staff, as you work together, how do you support each other? As you work to support your community, how do you set yourself up in each of your stores to support children through all of these different concentric circles?
Yeah, I think I'll start off by saying that, like I said, we are a staff of 4, so the struggle is real. But as a result, we communicate consistently with each other. We have our monthly staff meetings, and then we also have our group chat that we constantly talking to each other. We even have check-ins, like just randomly on the weekend sometimes of how are you feeling. Tacoma is a very diverse city. It's a very big city, it's very spread out. It's not just Seattle, but as a result, there's a lot of things within it that people have these conceptions about Tacoma. People say Tacoma's dangerous. People say, if you're in a big city, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where people say, oh, it's a dangerous city, you should never live there. Oh, it's this, that, and the next. It's like, no, it's just a city with a very diverse population, and as a result, we have different ways of thinking. And because we're so diverse, our children's section has to reflect the community. So we work very hard to find books with neurodiverse characters who are not just BIPOC, but characters who are Cambodian, characters who are Korean. We work very hard to include books that are not in English, not just English and Spanish, but books that are even maybe in Filipino, or books that are in, we recently got like a new Vietnamese children's book in. So those are ways that we try really hard to show our support for the community as a way of saying, we see you, we're here for you. And if there's a book that we don't have, we do our work to try and find it and see how can we get it in. And there's other small things we do too, like having a space for kids to just sit and read. I think people forget that's really important to do in your stores, having a space for children to actually sit and enjoy the books. And I think that alone is one reason why children feel safe in our space, to even, not necessarily buy a book, but to just be in a bookstore and enjoy the space.
Yay. I love that. I want to go to your store. So my role actually as education director started off as just coordinating authors in schools, but it has evolved into a lot of different things. And so it's become also educating the staff. We have a lot of adult booksellers who've been there for a lot of years. I mean, our book selling life is going to be 150 years old next year. So, you know, we run the gamut of, you know, young, super progressive booksellers and booksellers who've been around for a long time that might need some education on things, especially on the kids side, because they're on the left-hand side of the store in the adult section. And I'm always bringing books over and saying, hey, you know, anybody comes in, this would be wonderful for this. You know, they tend to listen a lot when I do book talks for kids and teachers. And I think part of being able to share how kids are changing, our population is becoming increasingly diverse, therefore our collection is adapting and changing along with that, I think is also important to share with booksellers who might not be over ensconced in the kids side. You know, helping a kid build a book stack and watch them read it on a chair. So that's a lot of it. We also have just general kinds of things. We share shelfie talkers. Honestly, if one of us is really jazzed about a kid's book, it blows up like wildfire. Like I'll go and I'll give it to every single bookseller and be like, read this, it's wonderful. And then, wow, that's our bestseller for the week because we all really believe in it. And we also do have like our community Slack, and I do a lot of recommending and things like that there. So supporting our staff is, I think, the foundation of then being able to support the people that come in so they feel welcome. I think our bookshop, just looking at it and being able to see that every single person, no matter who you are, is welcome in our store, needs to be reflected in our staff. So that is, you know, a big role that I've been taking on because I just think it's important.
And kind of going back to my earlier question to you all, like especially most of you who are in general bookstores, how many of you are the only person in the children's section? That's a huge role. And you know it. We do so much invisible labor as children's booksellers in general. And I mean, as a former child myself, like, kids are just adults who haven't been here as long. And so you are starting that foundation, and when you are alone in your store, and maybe someone comes in with their kid, and they're like, hey, you give them a book, and I'm gonna go browse, like, that's actually a huge responsibility. And so, for those stores who you may be the only person in the children's section, or there's maybe just a couple of you, do you sometimes feel like kind of siloed in your store within your responsibility? I feel like I would. Like, again, I'm coming from fully children's, so this is actually a bit of a new thought for me. Because we are a staff of 9, our whole store is kids, and it is all about adults and children experiencing play and wonder. So I feel very lucky in that, but I can't imagine not having the support of my fellow booksellers. So that's something that to be able to bring back to your store and to start thinking about how to create dialogue between everyone on your staff, because you are serving people at all ages. It's amazing how much we obviously separate children from adults, but we're all former children. I'm going to scoot to this slide because it kind of goes into that. I was saying to these folks over breakfast, do you sometimes feel like you're like a little bit of a little witch in your little apothecary, and someone says, I'm coming in with a need, I have this little need, and maybe it's a big hurt, maybe it's just like, I just want this little taste of something, and you go, and you reach to your shelf, and you go and you grab the right thing, you're like, I think this is the right thing for you. And maybe it's a tasty medicine, or maybe it's bitter, but it hits right away, and maybe it's a flavor that you never forget. We've all had that experience, handing a child a book, and that's incredibly special. And how do you signal that? How do you signal that you are not only a safe adult that a child wants to talk to, but that you maybe can actually, we talk a lot about this in this panel too, is you're at the circumvent authority a lot. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you have to go right to the root of the need in that child, because sometimes their grown-up, who holds the credit card, is right there, and it may be blocking you blocking that child from expressing that full need. So how do we signal as a store, as well as individual booksellers, that no, we are here to serve your need, and we are not the same sort of authority as maybe an educator or your guardian. So I really want, Danielle, in some of our talks leading up to this, you said the words, perceive me. And I would love for you to unpack that, because that is going into this, and how we as booksellers and then bookstores really, really meet our mission.
Yeah, so like I said, again, I'm from a very diverse city, and when I say perceive the child, I'm even talking in simple terms of like, if a black child comes in, if an Asian child gives in, give them a character with a black character, give them a book with like an Asian character. I even mean simple things like that. And don't necessarily go to what I have certain people say, like, oh, look at what kids wear. I'm also from a city where some people decide between light bill and food. So kids don't always get to choose what they wear. But kids, you can look at their face, look into what they're actually like looking at in the store. And that's what I mean by perceive the child. Like, actually talk to the child if you can. Don't just talk to the parent. Also, another thing we do in store, I don't think a lot of people think about this sometime in their children's section, is that we have child-safe like little step ladders for the kids. So they have some agency to actually get the books off like the higher shelves. Because again, shelf space is everything. We can't always have things at the bottom for kids. But I think having just that little step stool for kids, just so they can go, oh, I can actually reach the book I want. So even if they're not necessarily comfortable talking to me, then they have some agency themselves. And I think that's something we don't always think about. Like we all have step ladders. They're not all kid safe though. Mm-hmm. Like, don't let kids on the step ladders. But by having like a small step stool in store, it is very helpful. And again, just like let the child know that they're seen. A lot of kids just don't feel seen. They don't feel seen at school. Sometimes if they're in a big household, they don't feel seen at home. But if you help a child feel seen in your store, let them know they have agency, it can make a world of difference.
And that's something that we'll get to in the end too, is some actionable items like that. Like, what are those little things, even if they're kind of low risk or low lift, that actually make your store more welcoming than it maybe already is? Like, I mean, again, I come from a very like kid-centric store, and there's things that we talk about and I'm like, we can do that. Like, it's amazing how many little ways we can signal, macro and micro signaling. Lorie, for you, especially, and I am jumping ahead a little bit, the slides are just a reference, but serving as a resource for young people, because you are also working with educators, which are another form of authority and gatekeeping.
Yeah.
How have you kind of navigated that in your role as well to serve the actual root of the need?
Yeah, I used to be a teacher. I taught 5th grade for 10 years and other grades in elementary, and so, you know, books in kids' hands has always been a huge mission for me. I also taught with an anti-racist lens, which has grown as a bookseller, because while my reach isn't as deep with a group of fantastic young people that I get to have for 9 months, it's broadened to teachers all over our community who I get to work with over several years. And so, and yes, we are gatekeepers. In the era that we are in right now, educators are just under the thumb of school boards, of book bans, of a very loud and vocal minority, that we are getting everything from questions about author visits. Well, what is their presentation actually entailing? Can we see the slide deck? These are questions that we never got before the era that we are currently in now. So the gatekeeping has strengthened because people are afraid of their jobs. And my role is to try and cut through that fear so that educators are bringing these books back into their classrooms so every child feels seen and heard and validated. I do that a great deal with book talks. I say the things that we don't say out loud to teachers, because I really do believe that they want more than anything to be able to deliver the books in their classrooms and in their school libraries that help their students feel seen. So book talks are a huge thing. Things that I recommend, things that I post online even, because I do have a lot of educators that follow me, is important to be able to validate their experience, but also kind of work through cutting some of that tape that has bound them from the people in their community.
Mm-hmm. So as we center again on supporting children through tough times, again, for those who came in a little bit later, talking about kind of this concentric circles again of global tough times. How do we provide resources for that? Local things that happen, intrapersonal things that happen, and personal. And Danielle, you said one of the kind of buzzwords of this panel is agency. Giving that child the ability to find that resource on their own. Because it's great for us to interact with them, but we're still grown-ups, and no one can sell another child a book like another child. So finding, having even shelf talkers or reviews in your store written by other kids at kid eye level, again, having stepladders, there's all these things that, as we talk about these big, heady ideas of tough times, which is constant, giving the child the accessibility to find those answers themselves grounds you. And again, very much riding on the coattails of this morning, Renee said it very, very well, but one of the best ways to talk about tough times and to help kids get through tough times and feel grounded is joy. And Danielle, I'm going to defer to you because you came into one of our Zoom meetings fired up about joy as a response to tough times.
Yeah, I think that when people hear tough times, they immediately go to, okay, what's like a serious book? And mind you, serious books do exist for kids. We see them all the time. There are books written by the American Health Association about kids with depression. There are picture books for kids who are dealing with, say, an incarcerated parent. There are so many books out there for children going through these tough times and these difficult emotions that are hard to unpack sometimes. But a very radical thing, something I think we constantly forget, is that joy is a radical act. Joy is something that it can break through even the toughest times. And sometimes that's what you need to get through a tough time, is remind yourself that at the end of the tunnel, there is light, there is joy, there is happiness, there is an end. And I think that joy creates that space within kids. And so joy is everything from getting a book about the dealings with middle school and like you want to join the play, but you don't know how to get into the play, or going on a fantastical adventure with like a Monkey King. There's a really great graphic novel, by the way, about like Chinese mythology. I highly recommend. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Like those are ways that you can like spark joy within kids, and again, still help them feel seen.
Yeah, that is something that in our store as well, like having a mix of displays about where maybe it's a display that is addressing something tough going on or just a tough topic in general, mental health, whatever, having that. But we also have a display about like mushrooms or, you know, something goofy. I mean, how many of you, like, you have a parent come in with a child and, you know, they're like, oh, we should read about something serious, and the kid's just like, I want Dog Man. Yeah, because that fills them up. They are confident reading it. And I am not here to say you don't get that thing. I think, yes, it's important to build a foundation for what children are reading and keep going. That is a series that kids return to and return to. It brings them joy. It brings them security. So when it's hard sometimes as a bookseller to watch, and again, we're getting such a sliver of a window into that life, but you can read it because you are perceiving that child in that moment when you say to the parents, like, I don't want any more graphic novels. You got to read a bunch of real words. That's my soapbox for a different time. That, it kind of kills it. It kills it. How many of you ever had a teacher or someone who was like, you have to read this book, and it killed reading for you for a while? Big time. And sometimes discomfort is good. We know this. But as the characters in our community, as this fixture, this person in this child's life who is an adult, but is not a direct authority figure, we are just a steward of the space that we hold for them. It is not my job to say you should or should not read this. It really isn't. In a way that is, you know, is in more of a negative power over way.
Yeah, we are not the book police.
No. We are here to provide a space for them to find Dog Man, to find their bliss, as well as answers to hard things if that is what they're actually looking for. And to find themselves represented in a book, boy, does that feel good. And sometimes you are the portal for that. You come in, you see that child, and there's something about them, you know, they're like, you know, like they are masking very hard in front of their grown-up, but you get to look right through that grown-up to them and say, no, I see it, and I can hand you this book, and I won't maybe say everything this book is about in front of your grown-up, but I know that this is gonna hit, and we all know that feels really good. And you hope, you know, and then sometimes you never see the fruit of that labor, and that's okay. We talked about this a little bit before. I keep referencing it, but the parent does hold the credit card. We have talked about this a lot in my store because our store is solely for children. We need to make sure that even if some of the messaging and the things that we want kids to see themselves represented in, and have just like really strong views on things, sometimes you have to kind of not soften it, not like dumb it down, but like you're curating it to be able to get the parent to feel like they can bring that child in. And this is very case by case, very city by city. You know the city that you live in and how open or not open people are to certain ideas, to identities, as like in broad sweeps. Tacoma is going to be very different than a small town in Missouri. Like, that's just very different. And you know your store, you know your community. Some of these ideas, putting a pride display up, is also a radical act, and especially in certain places. We all know this. Like, putting a banned book display up is a radical thing. Like, you have to be wise to your surroundings to know how best to present those things to your community so you can get children into your store past the gatekeeper of the credit card with the credit card to get the resources they need. So autonomy and agency are enormous in this. I gotta get to my notes on this page. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit. About how, like, seeing a child, perceiving a child, and sometimes, like you were saying early in some of our things too, sometimes the books that are super on the nose are not the way. Billy has depression. Yeah, Heather has two mommies. It's the only book with my name in the title. And I mean, I'm kind of one of two mommies, so. I should get that book for my wife. I haven't, but
Such a good idea.
But we all know that those are not generally the books that sell to the child. They're not bad resources, but it is like prescribing medicine that is labeled medicine. It is not the sweet candy that still fills you up. So I want to defer to you two a little bit. I wanted to talk to you, Danielle, about the abstract and talking to children through the abstract, through the dog man, through the Una and the shark. Like, talk a little bit about that and how you navigate that through your displays.
Yeah, I love the abstract. That's where I live and breathe. So a lot of times, like, for example, I recently did an autism display, and one of the first books we put out was Una and the Shark, because it's never said, but the shark has autism. Like, it's never actually said, but it's very coded and it's very clear, and it's all about her learning how can I be there for my friend who just experiences things a little differently in life. Sometimes I know we have a lot of queer and trans kids out there, and you don't necessarily, and maybe you're in a place where you can't put certain books in your display, but you can have a book called Neither, about a bird who isn't either. They're not a boy, they're not a girl, they're just neither. Or you have Bunny Bear. It's all about a bunny who knows he's a bunny. He believes he's a bunny, but everyone says, no, you're a bear, you're a bear. You can't be a bunny. That's a great way of putting the abstract out there. And remembering that those abstract books are not just for kids to unpack, but it's also a great way for you, if you're in a space, to have that safe space for kids. Or maybe even give kids the book that their parents don't want them to have, but they go, no, it's just about a bunny. See, it's a bunny. It's fine. and then the kid has that book that they needed, but the parent had no clue, and that's horrible. Don't do that, but do that.
Yeah, no.
No, but do that.
but do that.
I am going to jump to the next slide because these are some actionable items. 50 minutes goes really fast, you guys. So when you return to the bookstore, and this will be available too, but obviously, you know what your store has room for, you know what your community is asking for, you know what your community might not be overtly asking for, but needs, and you're seeing those things that are coming in the coded books, like that. You're like, oh, we actually do need a display on this. If some of these feel really overwhelming, take the lowest risk one. Make a tiny display in the front window of things like, again, something like Una and the Shark. Like, moving the books that have things within them to not just little tiny picture book spine on the shelf, but face out.
Yeah.
Small thing, that costs $0 to do that. And one thing I wanted to say before we kind of move into Q&A, which is very quick.
And I want to jump in on one thing.
And yes, absolutely. One of the most, and I don't think it's in here, one of the most valuable resources in your bookstore, depending on the makeup of your bookstore, is other booksellers. You ask each other, what books did you not have as a kid? And what do you know now that you're like, oh man, this really hits? I mean, I come from a very conservative evangelical sex education, which is none. There are some incredible sex education books now that I look at, I'm like, man, I would have really benefited from that at this age, to not feel alone and weird and closeted. So ask your fellow booksellers too about what are they excited about, what do they want to put out there. That is also costs you no money. So Lorie, I want you to say your piece, and let's open it up for just a quick discussion. We have very few minutes.
Yeah, really quick. So I just wanted to share a story. We had an event at the shop last week with a kids book author, and I was running you're almost to the author part of the photo line where they're, getting all excited and nervous because they're about 10 feet from their literary hero, and that's great. And I had a little boy come up to me, and I had my Read with Pride pin on, which I don't just wear in June, by the way. Speaking of small things. And he said, "I really like your pin." And I said, "Thank you." And I have rainbow laces in my sneakers right now, and I pulled up my jeans, and I was like, "Do you like my laces?" And he said, "Oh, I really do." And it was so quiet. I kind of wondered what was happening with the tall people behind him. But, those are the small moments where a child will feel seen and validated with just a tiny, tiny interaction. So micro-signaling as well is something that I think is one of those small things to do that may make a great impact.
Yeah, and understanding, like you're saying too, like how you may be perceived in the context of your space. Coming up as me, like I'm going to be loud and colorful and gay in front of you, and that it's and parents sometimes they know, sometimes they don't, which is wild to me, but children know. They see right back through you, just like you're perceiving them. And that, just knowing how you are perceived in that space by both the adults and the children can help you kind of navigate and be that resource for them. So I'm going to open it up. We are all over because this is truly such a deep, deep topic that we are all very passionate about. And I know you are all here because you care about this as well. So does anyone have any kind of questions, comments that we want to do? Yeah.
Bax went up first, and then I'll come up. We have 15 minutes, and so
what?
I'm just letting
I
y'all
thought this only
know.
went till 9:50. Oh, it's because we started. Jesus Christ.
Thank you
better,
for being
though.
here.
Yes.
My question for you is, could you each please just share one kind of tough time topic that comes up and your favorite title to recommend for that?
So I'm going to jump in really quick, because this one's very easy for me. Like I said, we are a queer and trans zone store, and even though Tacoma is very diverse, very, very progressive, we're surrounded by red. It's a whole thing. There are a lot of kids who are trans who are very depressed, and I have gotten kids asking me for books about suicide. It happens all the time, and I'm always like, okay, guess what? You're getting the Witch King. You're going to learn all about joy. You're going to go on a magical adventure. You are just going to get happiness and joy. And I always recommend the Witch King. Okay, I always do that one. And there's also, it's another graphic novel that I do too. I'm spacing, but the Witch King's always a very good one for that one specifically. Highly recommend.
Highly recommend.
I'm literally having to sift through the shelves in my store right now.
Keep thinking. You got one?
What?
You got one?
I feel like I'd have a better answer. That's a great question. So I'm like, what do I do? But I think, even in the little subtle things, again, in the more perceiving way, one of my favorite graphic novels to recommend to any kid is Another Kind. Really good about, just kids working together. It's a bunch of cryptid kids trying to escape a lab, but they have a great discussion about just gender-neutral pronouns. It's kids having discussion about hard things amongst themselves. It's not always an adult figure who's been around dispensing wise wisdom. They are wise amongst each other. And I think that's just been a very good one when kids are coming in and wanting something about camaraderie, wanting something about identity, whether they say it or not. That is a favorite of our, we can't keep that book on the shelf. The whole staff is like, everybody, it's so good. That's one. It's less poignant and direct, but it is one that I just kind of keep constantly on the back burner as well.
Can I plug a book in a galley room?
Yes.
Okay, so I know this is going to sound strange, but Kate McKinnon just wrote Millicent Quibb, that is for the weird kid that
Yeah, it
doesn't
sure
fit in their
is.
family, the weird kid that doesn't fit in school. It's like, it's Kate McKinnon, you get what you get. And but it's well written and it's cheeky, but like, it's not necessarily tough time specific, but like tough existence specific.
Exactly.
So if they're still there, that's a great one to, it's new, hopefully it's gonna be a series. Give that to the little weirdos, because I felt healed. And then I watched Bluey, which healed me even more.
Yeah. Did you have a title, Lorie?
Yeah, so we live in a very purple area where you have a segment of our population that bleeds blue and a segment of our population that drives down the main drag in a bro truck with an American flag and a Trump flag flying out the back. So a lot of our book selling has to be a little subversive, which is kind of fun. And so we do have an increasing number of kids who are questioning their identity, kids who are on the LGBTQ perspective.
Spectrum.
Thank you. But maybe their parents don't know yet. And one of the books that I read a couple of years ago, I read a really early copy, was called The Other Woods by Justine Purcell Winans. And yeah, and it was the first book that I read where the characters' pronouns throughout the entire book were they, them. And I just was overjoyed to see that representation. So that's another one, that's one that I slip in because it's also fantasy. It's also, you're in a forest and things are coming at you, you have to survive and you're finding your friend, and there are all of these amazing elements in it as well. And I believe that her new one, Wishbone, is in the galley room as well. So that would be mine.
This is something I'd forgotten to say earlier, but kind of along the lines of that, as far as resources for tough times, I have the luxury of, again, having my whole store be children's, but even in your system, tagging things with different there's words, one of our sections that I think is one of our best is our death section, because when you are in the middle of grief and you're trying to find answers for your child, for yourself, you do not need to make more decisions. You do not need to scour amongst all of the Jory John and the Mac Barnett and whatever to find the weird translated Norwegian book that just hits it.
Yep.
Like having that, and if you don't have physical space in your store, have that as a tag in your system. If your system allows you to do a tag, like keyword books that you love, so that when someone is coming up and they say, hey, I just had, I'm buying books for a family whose father just died by suicide, like how do I deal with it? We say, well, here's a section and let me bring you over, and then I'm gonna go look up some specific titles, but here's a little moment you can have of peace and knowing that this is gonna hold you. It's like, as much as you can do that with what space you have and resources you have, it is so valuable, and you will also thank yourself later, because standing there kind of like, it's not fun. We've all been there, but it's been really helpful for us. Anyway, more questions?
So kind of in a slightly different vein and addressing being the book police and also not wanting to be too graphic in front of a child. I had a woman come into the store. I have a store in a city. It's pretty small. Our children's section is about 30%, and we have about 1,200 square feet. And I had a woman come in with her daughter, and my staff member asked me to come down to help her with books on bullying. And so as I'm coming down the stairs, I'm thinking about books on bullying where it all ends up okay. So what actually happens is the mom takes me in back, falls into my arms sobbing about her daughter being bullied. We come out into the store, and the daughter has picked a bunch of books that are adult romance. And I am, right?
Danielle's leading a panel
and
about this later, so. There is a session on that.
Okay,
We have a panel for that.
because this is the thing, and I'm sort of like, and it's Allie Hazelwood and a couple of others, and so they're what we call in the store more of the meet cute romance as opposed to some hardcore erotica. But So
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
no. But at any rate, so I'm saying to this mom, these are adult titles with adult content, and I probably said it like 6 times. And and I'm thinking to myself, lady, this is the time you should be doubling down. This is the time you really need to support your child and give them what they truly need and not let them go to school with these books. So I asked the child, what's the thing you loved most that you recently read? And of course it's Percy Jackson. And so I pull some stuff that's similar, and I was like, well, you might really enjoy these, and they might be a much better choice. I think you'll find stuff in there that you'll really relate to more. And meanwhile, and I said, and you don't have to take them to school, because it's quite clear, it becomes clear that this is the problem. The kids at school are reading adult romance, and she likes Percy Jackson. And so how do you guys, how, as booksellers, our responsibility to trying to connect with the child and have them have a good life experience, but also, I have 4 children. I would not have wanted them walking out with adult romance.
So I will quickly say that we are doing a romance panel. I'm doing that panel, and it's all about romance for kids and teens. I will quickly say this: I do not believe in shame. I was 10 years old when I read my first Danielle Steele novel. My parents didn't believe in censorship, they believed in talking to me. I was a kid who could not handle violence. I couldn't handle, if someone had given me Percy Jackson, I would have broke down in tears. I could not handle Hunger Games as a kid. That would have never happened for me. But I could handle romance, I could handle sex, because my parents talked to me. So I will quickly say that we are not the book police in that sense of if you don't feel comfortable, I understand that. But at the same time, we are not book police. We do not shame children for what they choose to read. And again, there is romance for teens. It does exist. There's romance for teens, for middle grades, for kids. It all exists. Love, Violet is a picture book all about your first crush in kindergarten. It's beautiful. So but I just want to make it very clear, if a child is picking up adult romance, there's probably a reason. And I really don't want people to shame that child, because I was that kid. Let me read my sexy shifters. Please, I'm a freak already. Let me just be a freak.
I do think too, I think of books that, and I feel like a lot of us, just like this, how many times have you said I read that book way too early? And here you are.
You made it.
And again, we don't know the context that child is in, and sometimes the best way to get to the root of what kind of a book a child wants is to say, what do you not want to read? What are you not interested in? You're maybe not interested in some book about love and life that your grown-up's you would love this. And you're like, no, I want shape-shifting vampires in bed. It's just and again, yes, no, we are, again, because we get such a sliver of that context, we can only do so much. They are coming to us so directly with what they want. And so much of a child's life, they don't have autonomy to say, what do I want? And they're going to read some things, they're going to be like, I do not know what this is. I don't know what I'm reading right now. This makes me feel a little weird in my tummy, but books are a safe place to feel a little weird in your tummy about something.
If I can shout out one more book, this one is an adult title, but I recommend it for teens all the time. It's called Upside Down by N.R. Walker. Please write that down. It is the only fully ace romance I have ever been able to find. It's about one guy who just learned he's ace, and then one guy who's been ace for years, and they have a relationship. There's no smut, because again, they're ace. It is the book that taught me that I'm ace. It's the book I wish I had, growing up. And again, it is an adult title because they're adults. They're having difficult occupations, but it's great for teenagers who want a romance, but maybe you don't want to give them smut. And again, you never know what kid's gonna go, oh my God, this all makes sense now. That's why I'm like this. So
Who's the author on that again?
N.R. Walker, she's an Australian author. She's super awesome. I'm meeting her in October. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. It's fine.
So, oh my God, that's loud. I had a magical moment when I became a bookseller that kind of healed some of that
inner shame I had as a child with my undiagnosed ADHD and my hate for reading through like 16 years old with A Wrinkle in Time, because I don't know if I'm like saying something new or something that everybody knows, but it feels very neurodivergent to me. Like the characters just scream like ADHD, autism coded, because they're special in their special way. Are there any other books that are a little more subtle, where like maybe the parents don't know that their kid has a touch of autism, but you look at them and you're like, yeah.
Danielle,
Yeah, I have one. The Misfits by Lisa Yee.
Yeah, I was gonna
Okay.
say Misfits.
Yeah. The school that the kids are in, and the illustrations are by Dan Santat. So the accessibility piece with, you know, the illustrations drawn in there is also aces. So the school that the kids all go to, for those of you who don't know the book, their neurodivergency in many ways is their superpower, but it's never said. It's just supported and elevated, and a strength that, you know, saves the school and all of that. So
We're at time. So what I want to tell you all is that this is just kind of the kickoff. There are a handful of excellent upcoming panels, including the one Danielle is on. So there's some supporting sessions that kind of splinter this off. This is kind of, again, a call to remember why we are here, but some other ones, book bans, impact on marginalized communities is an offshoot of this, social responsibility in children's book selling, as well as social emotional learning with romance. So those are all coming up in the next day or two. Please keep talking about this amongst yourselves. It is so important to remember why we're here as we go back to our own stores and come down from the mountaintop.
thank you.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!